Hello, my name's Houston, and this is Media Mood Board. Well, we got our Christmas stuff up. The apartment smells like a heater, and pretty much everybody's got a backlog of media from this year that they're trying to get through, me included. So today's episode is a list of my end-of-the-year TBR. So books, games, movies that I'm trying to get through the end of the year, so I have a good idea of what all came out this year. I try to be as reasonable as possible with this. In many cases, there's like triple or quadruple what I could actually get through that I'm like, I would like to go through all of these. Like, sure, would I like to get through 17 books? Yeah. But realistically, I can probably get 3 or 4. If there's any movies, books, or games that you've been like, oh man, this is right up my alley. I've been wanting to read or watch this, but I just haven't got the chance this year. I'm going to try to do it before the year's over. Leave it in the comments. I love seeing what other people like. Let's get into it. Books, baby. Since I moved to New York this year, I feel that because I don't have as many friends around and things like that, I've really gone back into reading in a way that has been really exciting. I'd been doing a pretty good job at reading the previous 2 years, but this year I really felt like I was really connecting and having fun with choosing of the books and things like that. So one of the tough things about books is it's not just something you can finish in 2 hours like a movie, which is an obvious statement, but one that I'm saying anyways. So I had a bunch of selects. We're going to go through my honorable mentions, and then I picked 3, and then I asked Rosie, hey, what's a book that you read that came out this year that you really liked? And I'm going to read that one too. So let's just jump in. Once again, I've written my own brief synopsises for each one of these, and when I've looked down, that's just me reading it. Also, for most of these, there's not necessarily a reason why I'm like, I don't want to read this. I do want to read it. When there's this many, you just have to prioritize it just based on gut. So first, all the runners up, the honorable mentions, the things that I'll put off till next year, or at least I'll tell myself that I will read next year. We'll start with the longest one at 724 pages. This is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. Apologies in advance, I will butcher all of these authors' last names. An epic multi-generational story about a family that shares a lineage with the Christian apostles and is cursed to have at least one person in each generation die by drowning. I think it was last year or the year before, I played Dragon Quest V for the first time, which tells this kind of multi-generational story. And because of that, then I read 100 Years of Solitude. And I enjoyed both of those and thought that kind of like telling something over that span of time was really interesting, which has kind of piqued my interest about this one. It's just so long. It's kind of like, if I chose this one, then I would basically say this is the only book that I'm going to be reading for the end of the year. And I probably wouldn't even finish it. Prophet by Sin Blanchet and Helen MacDonald. 2 investigators, one with the ability to distinguish truth from lies innately, investigates a mysterious object which has appeared that is able to absorb people's memories and then kill them with it. This is co-authored by Helen MacDonald, who wrote H for Hawk, which I really loved. It was kind of a mix of essay and history book, and that's pretty much why I'm interested in this one. Honestly, I like sci-fi, but the premise of this one really doesn't do anything for me. I think it sounds a little cheesy, but I like Helen MacDonald, so that's why it's on this list. If the premise sounded intriguing, I would 100% jump on this, but because it's not, I'll put it off. Murder Your Employer, The McMasters Guide to Homicide by Rupert Holmes. A dark comedy chronicling the adventures of new applicants to the McMasters Conservatory, a school dedicated to the homicidal arts. I read the first few pages of this one, and it seemed very like series of unfortunate events, like that kind of humor. And so that really kind of tickled me and got me excited about it. This is probably one where from my selects, if I end up like, okay, whatever, and not liking it or whatever, I'll probably slip this one in just because it would be a super fast, easy read. I have no idea what the actual plot of it is, but I just like the tone. The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Kit gets a new job in a creaking old house, taking care of a woman who only communicates through a typewriter, and was rumored to have murdered her sister when she was young. This is a thrill. I think Rosie read this one earlier in the year and she enjoyed it. I really haven't read too many thrillers this year, and this is one that I've seen the cover a lot of. I think I've seen a lot of people talking about on like Book Talk and stuff like that. So this could be a fun one to jump in. And it's got like a cool old house. That's fun. I just read all these old Gothic books, so this kind of old creepy house. It might be interesting to see how that ties into the history of the genre. Rouge by Mona Awad. After Belle's mother mysteriously dies, she's reached out to by a wellness spa, which Belle begins to suspect is behind her mother's death. Wellness spa, cults. Also, Bunny. Bunny is the book by the same author that was really popular, and this one seems to have that same interesting dark tone. I also haven't read too much horror that like spooked me out, so maybe this will be in that realm. Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. When her best friend disappears at sea, Princess Tress must leave everything she knows to find the sorceress of the deadly Midnight Sea. I've heard amazing things about Brandon Sanderson. I have the first entry in the Mistborn series, just have not read it, and read snippets of this and thought it was very funny. I have not read his stuff, but he seems kind of Douglas Adams-y at least in this book, which I think Douglas Adams is a really cool guy, so I'm down to read this. Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kawame, Ajay Brinya. Two top-rated women gladiators of Cape, criminal action, penal entertainment, attempt to win their freedom through gamified death matches between private prisons. So in my research for this, I looked at a lot of like year-end lists or the ones that are out so far. Chain Gang All-Stars was on almost all of them. Most of the books I read are more like drama than action. I don't read that much action, and a lot of reviews for this called out how brutal and like visceral the action felt in this. So I'd be interested in hearing some storytelling of a type of scenario which I'm not familiar with, especially one that's this hype. Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. A novelist locks himself away in a lonely cottage to work on his final novel, inspired by a childhood summer where a killer was loose in a small town when memory and reality start to blur. I thought this one was interesting because Phoebe. Hold on. This one seemed interesting to me as supplemental material to other things that I've gone through this year. Right now I'm playing Alan Wake 2, which is about a horror novelist, which whatever he writes comes true. And part of the narrative of this is that one of his childhood friends stole one of his novels and published it himself. And the stealing of a manuscript and then publishing it under your own name is the premise to Yellowface. So it'd be interesting to see how they all talk to each other. Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire de Durer. A collection of essays by Claire de Durer on the conversations around separating art from the artist. I'm sure I'm pronouncing her name wrong. There's no... and I apologize, Claire. I love a good essay. That seems like a good collection. I don't have much more to say on it. Lament for Julia by Susan Taubes. A coming-of-age story narrated by a sexless spirit overseeing the care of a woman in the 20th century. This is a book that was apparently written a long time ago and then was just now published. Also, this kind of ghostly element to it sounds really fun. The Maiden by Kate Foster. The Maiden tracks the downward spiral of Lady Christian Nimmo, a high society woman in 1600 Scotland charged with adultery and the murder of her lover, inspired from a real-life case. This is historical fiction. It just sounds interesting. It's such a like small thing that I'm interested in. Like a lot of times when it's like, especially in the 1600s, and she's like a high society person, it's going to be this thing about like manners in class and kind of how different people communicate and what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say. Just, that's fun territory. I'm Homeless If This Is Not My Home by Lori Moore. It tells dual stories of a teacher visiting his dying brother in the Bronx who ends up on a road trip with the decaying zombie of his recently deceased ex-girlfriend and the letters of a proprietress of a boarding house in the 1800s who's renting a room to a thinly veiled John Wilkes Booth. Lori Moore has been compared to like George Saunders, so that's interesting. And I like these kind of two different historical and fiction stories. Also, some of the prose in it just sounds interesting, like the girlfriend who comes back from the dead describes herself as like a casserole of rot. Turns of phrase like that sound funny and interesting. On top of looking at year-end lists and then also looking at publishers who I like, that I was like, okay, what have I missed this year? I also tried to look at awards nominees just to see what books were out there that were up for awards, which is where the next two come from. Blackouts by Justin Torres. A young man tends to a dying soul in the desert, where they trade stories about queer subjects and how they've been co-opted. Winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. This one's a pretty hard sell because it's basically saying, hey, here's some stories. There you go. That's the plot. We're going to tell you a bunch of different stories. I've never read this author before, so jumping into it would basically be going off its pedigree. And then Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. A young woman moves to a remote village to take care of her recently divorced brother. And when a strange series of ominous events begin occurring, the tight-knit village begins to turn against her. Shortlisted for the Booker Prize. The book is less than 200 pages. I love how compact the premise is. It just sounds like a fun, interesting, kind of spooky time. Sounds like a good thriller. And since it's also up for the Booker, I just also assume that it's kind of like really well described. And that's something I'd be interested in seeing, especially with these weird, ominous kind of like happenings. Okay, now we're on to, for better, for worse, what I decided I'm going to try and start with as far as the 3 that I'm going to read before the end of the year, or try to, and the 4th one, which is a Rosie's pick. We'll start off with Rosie's pick, which is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. A Cambridge professor and fairy studies expert travels to a small town for research and uncovers the roots of a dark magic brewing. This is like a cozy fantasy novel, which I haven't read any yet, but I know it's a huge genre, so it'll be cool to jump in and see what that's all about. I'll probably listen to this one on audiobook. It seems like a really good candidate for that. And now, the other 3. Reproduction by Louisa Hall. Drawing from the author's own life as well as the life of Mary Shelley, Reproduction is literary fiction about a novelist who tries to write a book about Mary Shelley when the themes in Frankenstein start to parallel the novelist's life in a way she can't ignore. This thing's also about 200 pages. I really enjoy the mix of nonfiction and fiction. So something that's like, I'll learn about Mary Shelley's actual life. There'll be some weird stuff with the main character. I like that kind of mix of stuff. So this will hopefully be fun. The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. A servant girl escapes from a colonial settlement in the wilderness and tries to survive with only her wits and her faith in God. I've been seeking out good faith representations, and this one sounds like a cool one. Also, like I've seen this book at like Barnes and Nobles, and it's just such a cool cover. How can you not want to read it with a cover like that? And then finally, the book that I'm the most excited to read from these, Ascension by Nicholas Binge. When an enormous mountain suddenly appears in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a team is assembled to summit its peak and investigate. All of these summaries are condensed log lines from like 4 or 5 paragraph back of the book things. You know how book descriptions are. They're always very long. This one is recommended for fans of Ted Chiang, which he's my favorite author. And there's other elements in this that I'm like, oh man, like yes. Get me in there immediately. So this is next up on my list to read. I can't wait. All right, that's books. Let's move to games. Games are an even more difficult proposition for me because of how slow I play them and then how infrequently I play them. Unless a game like really grabs me, it's going to take me a long time to play it. Case in point, I played Armored Core 6 for like 3 months. So once again, I got a longer list here, but I narrowed it down to 4, which may be stupid. I definitely will not be able to get through 4, but my cat is messing with my Christmas tree behind me if you see it moving. Crosley, stop it. You're not allowed, okay? I've narrowed it down to 4, which is too many. I should probably narrow it down to 2, actually. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to narrow it down to 2. I'm going to have my 2 selections and then the 2 backups, and then I'll do the runners-up. So, honorable mentions, the runners-up. Final Fantasy XVI by Square Enix Creative Business Unit 3. The latest entry in the story Japanese RPG series, Final Fantasy XVI is a return to the series' high fantasy roots, but with an active battle system, telling the story of a country on the verge of a magical drought, and the political battle between countries who employ dominance, humans who act as hosts for gods. The battle system seems really fun. It's basically like a Kingdom Hearts-y or like the new Final Fantasy VII. And I'm really interested in the story too, as far as just like kind of the themes that they're playing with. I know it won't be very like nourishing necessarily, but these ideas of these people who are born with these connections or earn these connections to gods, and whether or not they deserve them, but they each have power, and kind of if that gets to their head or not, and how heavy that determines like a political. It just seems like a really fun schmaltzy like fantasy book, which is great. So if I had more time, this would definitely be on my to play. Dave the Diver by Mint Rocket. Dave the Diver is a casual single-player adventure RPG featuring deep-sea exploration and fishing during the day and a sushi restaurant management sim at night. It seems cute and fun. It's also on a lot of like year-end lists, which is interesting. This has been a pretty big year for like AAA games, which isn't necessarily my bag, but they're going to like sweep any sort of lists. Pikmin 4 by Nintendo EPD, the latest entry in the Pikmin franchise, Nintendo's take on the RTS, in which cute little spacemen lead groups of tiny plant people on a search for their missing spaceship captain. I love the Pikmin aesthetic, and this one seems cute and fun. It's just one of those things like with books, you know, it's like it's not necessarily that I don't want to play it, it's just there's other stuff I want to play more. Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew by Me Games, a real-time stealth strategy game following the adventures of a cursed pirate crew. I've heard this like Me Games last game maybe, but I really enjoyed Desperados 3, and I'd love to jump into this like kind of pirate thing. It's just fun to play like a good strategy game. Citizen Sleeper Purge by Jump Over the Age, the newest DLC from the sci-fi visual novel Citizen Sleeper, in which you try and accommodate a group of refugees that arrive on the space station where you live, while questions loom over what they were running from. I loved Citizen Sleeper. It's my favorite visual novel, probably. I need to find more games with the gameplay of Citizen Sleeper because I absolutely loved it. The Cliff's Notes version is, depending on how much energy you have, based on how much you ate the last day, you'll roll a certain number of dice. So let's say you roll 3 dice. You roll a 6, a 2, and a 1. You're living on a spaceship, and there's all these little nodes where, okay, you can go get some food, you can go work here and make some money, you can try and fix something, whatever. And depending on how high your dice is, it can be a more successful endeavor. Or you can start slowly adding towards a larger total that would take several days, or sometimes they'll need specific die or odds or evens or whatever. And so you make decisions based on what you have. It's fun. Regrettably, I haven't played any of the DLC yet, which was free, but I am super pumped to play this. Even if I don't play this year, I am really excited to play it. Another visual novel, Misericorde by ZC, a visual novel where you play the role of an anchoress, a nun who has taken an oath never to leave their cell, who is called in to investigate a murder which has occurred in her convent. Don't know much about this. The visual style seems cool. It's like in black and white, and a murder in like a convent. That's fun. Roadwarden by Moral Anxiety Studio, a text-based fantasy RPG where you play the role of a Roadwarden, a ranger for hire who delivers messages, assists merchants, burns human corpses, or anything else that can earn them a little coin. The first games I really played a lot of were text-based adventure games. That's what I cut my teeth on, and I returned to them in college. And this one got a lot of positive praise. I didn't include this on my top one because I just didn't know how much time I would really have to sit down and just read. I know there's a choice element to it, which is cool, but I'd rather spend that time reading the books that I'm trying to get through. Okay, so now we move to my impromptu 2 backups from the 4. I just right now went down to 2 and 2. So these are the backups in case I don't like the ones that I've chosen, or find time for them. Viewfinder by Sad Owl Studios, a puzzle game where pictures you take with an instant camera can be jumped into and used to solve platforming puzzles. I've seen some streamers play this, and it just looks really fun. It's a super simple premise, and it just looks really well executed. One of those like, ooh, what a good idea indie games where you immediately get what it is, and you're excited to see how they iterate on it. And A Space for the Unbound by Mojiken, a coming-of-age story set in 90s Indonesia where 2 high school sweethearts work together to fight a mysterious supernatural power threatening to destroy reality. Once again, this is a really pretty one. It's supposed to be very heartfelt. The story is supposed to be interesting. Also, it's set in 90s Indonesia, so that's really cool. And now on to the 2 that I will try and beat in the next few weeks. Dredge by Black Salt Games, a fishing game where you catch and sell fish to build bigger boats, help out the citizens of different islands, and explore the Lovecraftian water of the night. That's a game that's gotten a lot of hype. It's kind of one of the indie darlings of the year. It kind of has a similar structure to Citizen Sleeper. It's this like visual novel-y thing that has these kind of mini-gamey things in between. I've played a little bit of it already, and it's really fun, and I can't wait to play it more. And then finally, Super Mario Bros. Wonder by Nintendo EPD, a new 2D Mario game headed up by the director of Mario Odyssey and Mario Galaxy 2. This is a game that I'd known about. You know, I saw the trailers for it, thought, oh, okay, whatever. I don't really love like new Super Mario Bros. And a lot of those newer 2D Marios, but I heard a bunch of incredible things about this, and I heard about the director and how bonkers it is. If the newer 2D Mario games are them trying to take the 2D Mario formula and kind of put it in 3D, see how it works, Super Mario Wonder, the thought behind it is, let's take the 3D Mario mentality and put it onto a 2D Mario game. So lots of weird gimmicks, a million ideas on the wall, do something incredible for 5 to 10 minutes that another game would make a 40-hour game out of. And then when you're done with it, just like toss it. So super excited to just blast through that, just experience it. These games are always kind of easy. They sometimes reach harder difficulties later, like secret levels that you do. But this is just going to be an experience game to see a lot of really fun ideas and just blaze through it and have a great time. And if you haven't seen the animations for this, look it up because the animations for this are so good. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the movies I would hope to see by the end of the year. I've covered a lot of the ones that came with the New York Film Fest ad nauseum, and I have no idea if some of them will even be coming to wide release before the end of the year. The only ones that I will briefly call out are Poor Things, May December, and The Boy and the Heron. I know those are getting wide release, so I know that I'll have the chance to see them at least before the end of the year. Unlike with books or games, the likelihood that I'll be able to make it through all these is pretty high. So there's no, I'm going to watch these, I'm not going to watch these. These are just all the ones that I would like to see by the end of the year. Saltburn. Struggling to find his place at Oxford University, student Oliver Quick finds himself drawn into the world of the charming and aristocratic Felix Catton, who invites him to Saltburn, his eccentric family's sprawling estate, for a summer never to be forgotten. Dark academia, euphoria weirdness with a really cool sense of style. It looks like a good time. Looks fun. Looks weird. Looks dark. Eileen. In 1960s Massachusetts, an unhappy prison secretary is beguiled by a new coworker who pulls her into complicity in a crime that surpasses her wildest imaginings. This is based on a book by Otasa Moshfegh, who I really, really like. This book I read this year and thought it was just okay. But I think that the performances and the style of this film will make it actually better than the book. So I'm excited for it. Polite Society. Martial artist in training Ria Khan believes she must save her older sister Lena from her impending marriage. After enlisting the help of her friends, Ria attempts to pull off the most ambitious of all wedding heists in the name of independence and sisterhood. This is one that I missed earlier in the year. It looked super fun, and I hope to catch it before the year's out. In that similar vein, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. When her family moves from the city to the suburbs, 11-year-old Margaret navigates new friends, feelings, and the beginning of adolescence. Also looks just like cute, fun, coming of age, slice of life. I missed it earlier this year, even though I wanted to see it. Looks like a good time. Passages. In contemporary Paris, German filmmaker Thomas embraces his sexuality through a torrid love affair with a young woman named Agatha, an impulse that blurs the lines that define his relationship with his husband, Martin. This is one that came out early this year that had a lot of hype around the performances in it. I didn't get a chance to see it, but it's on Movie for free now, so I'm going to try and watch it. Showing Up. An artist on the verge of a career-changing exhibition navigates family, friends, and colleagues in the lead up to her show and finds that the chaos of life becomes the inspiration for more great art. I never know exactly how to categorize these ones. That this was shown at Cannes in 2022, but it got wide release in 2023. So I'm just going to count it as a wide release. This is directed by Kelly Reichardt, who did First Cow, and stars Michelle Williams, who I think is an incredible actor. I saw trailers for this and didn't think it looked interesting, to be honest. A movie that the pitch is, it's an artist making art, isn't on its face interesting to me. It just seems like, okay, it seems like you're kind of blowing yourself up a little bit, but there's a lot of good reviews for this. A lot of people love it, so, I'm on board. And then finally, No One Will Save You. A young woman who's been alienated from her community finds herself in a face-off against a host of extraterrestrial beings who threaten her future while forcing her to deal with her past. This is a straight-to-Hulu sci-fi thriller that came out, I think, in October. It looked fun, looked thrilling. There's apparently not much dialogue, which is really interesting. This looks like a good time. Well, you made it. Those are all the things I'm trying to catch up on before I make my end-of-the-year lists. Once again, if there's anything that you're hoping to get to that you haven't got a chance to yet, leave it in the comments. We'll see how much of these I actually get through. Sometimes you got to shoot for the stars, baby. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another hyper-specific entertainment list. My name is Houston. This is Media Mood Board. Bye.